Okay, we just looked at maintenance, and now let's look at SQL Server Agent. Once again, you see I have SQL Server Agent running, and if you skipped the last video, then what you need to do is open Configuration Manager and start SQL Server Agent. Okay, so SQL Server Agent is running. We've been using SQL Server Agent for a long time. Also, by default, SQL Server Agent is turned off. So we got SQL Server Agent running. Now we've got jobs, which I'll cover just a second there. Alerts and operators, and here's my error logs. And if I'm using a proxy, here's my proxies in here. So let's first take a look at operators. Operators is an old term. It really means who gets notified. So I'm going to right click and go new operator. And the name, I'm going to put Bob because we've been picking on Bob for over 20 years and he's used to it. So I'm going to enter Bob's contact information in here, bob@mycompany.biz. The name is not resolved. NetSend, nobody uses NetSend anymore. Look at how old these dialog boxes are. Pagers. So you can set up the schedule down there, pager on duty schedule, etc., Saturday, Sunday. And now we've got Bob in here. Just to show you, if we go over to the notifications tab, view notifications sent to this user by alerts. Okay. So we're in here and it's enabled. Now when I say okay, there's our poor victim, Bob. Okay, let's move up to alerts. And I'll right click and do new alert. And this will make sense to you almost immediately. And I'm going to call this log hi. And you notice there's three types of alerts: a SQL Server event alert, a performance counter, condition, or WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation, which is beyond the scope of this. So that's pretty cool. WMI, and now I'm looking at these objects, counter, instant, and alert if. If you're used to Performance Monitor, this will look pretty familiar. So our object I'm going to look at, there's a ton of objects, and if I can find what I want, okay, counter. And if I pull that down, there we are, %log used. Instance, which database and we're using in here, and we can go in there and say AdventureWorks 2014. Alert if counter, raise the alert if the counter rises above 80% of the log, okay? And I'm going to move to the response tab and I can execute a job. So if I was looking at something that I wanted to do and a certain alert fired up and I wanted to run a database backup, then I would do it from here. All this stuff cascades. So you need to be careful and test this. But instead, we're going to persecute Bob. That's why we put him in there. So we're going to notify operator Bob via email. And we'll say, okay. Now this kind of shows you how dated this stuff was, but it works fine. The reason I say that, if you notice, the email was never resolved. So now we've got that login here and it's running. See, and it's going to work down here on Bob. So let's take a look at a job. And before we do that, let's let SQL help us a little. I'm going to open a query we've used before, just a little create test company query, which we worked on earlier. And I'm going to execute it, and it's just going to create a database for us that we can use. Test company, and we'll go ahead and close this. And now what we want to do is we're going to create a SQL Server Agent job that will back up test company for us on some schedule that we pick. So I'm going to right click this, tasks, and I'm going to say backup. Okay, and I'm going to script action to new query window, and I'll cancel out of this, and ta-da! I've already got the code that I know will work. So let's go down here to jobs, right click, new job, and we'll give it a name, BU backup test. And you can categorize it, etc. But now we come down to steps. So you see you can have multiple steps in here. A word to the wise. Be careful of this when you add multiple steps, going through, because it can fail, and these can be a little more difficult to troubleshoot depending on different conditions. My prejudice, I work in integration services all the time, and I like to be able to fire those up because then I can just actually step through those. So I'm going to gain a new step, and we're going to call it backup, and it's going to be a T-SQL, and the type could be, you see any of these integration services package. There's our friend PowerShell. Don't use ActiveX. But there we go, PowerShell, and we're going to stick with T-SQL. I'm going to let the query editor help me. Control A, Control C, Alt Tab, back over into this. Tab in there, Control V. Okay, and let's parse it. Always parse your code. It worked. Sounds fine, and we'll say OK. So now if I was going to add other steps after I did the backup, maybe I'd do the backup and then run a database consistency check, or maybe I'd do a backup and at that time come through and call update statistics, which can run forever. You can come in here and set your schedules right there. So if I wanted a schedule, I can set a new schedule. And this is the dialog box that we looked at earlier. And so we would just set that. Again, notification. Let's email our friend Bob when the job fails. And you notice page net send right to the Windows application log. And we'll say OK. So now there's BU test. And this is the same thing. Start job step. And it closed. So there we go. So we have a job. We can set this up. What I tried to do here was create a SQL Server Agent job. That was the same as the maintenance jobs that we did earlier. Now let's just clean up our mess a little bit here. I'm going to go through and just delete this stuff. Poor Bob. He's gone. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's get rid of test company 2. And try to keep as consistent an interface as we can. So there's your SQL Server Agent jobs.